Hey everyone, welcome back to Baking in Real Life. I am Rachel, your baking coach. So today I want to talk to you about customer expectations versus reality. So I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and he owns a piñata business. And so people will send him pictures of what they want their piñata to look like, and he'll try to do his best to, make it realistic. That happens to us as bakers all the time, right? We get inspiration photos sent to us, and then it's our job to do our best representation of that. So it reminded me of a time I was very early on in baking. Again, a lot of my really horrible things come from the early days, but it happens. And a lady had sent me an inspiration photo. It was for a Sesame Street cake. If I can find the picture of the inspiration and what I made, I'll post it. So she sent me the inspiration photo, and it was like a blue cake with red, yellow, green polka dots, and I want to say maybe some kind of a character. I don't 100% remember. And I had done all the fondant. I had hand dyed all of it. So this was before I really was buying a lot of fondant. I still prefer to make it. Just here where I am now, it's very difficult to do because I don't have a microwave. Anyway, so I had made the fondant, I had hand dyed it, and I remember being up so late. And I remember just looking at this fondant and being like, okay, this is, we're close. This is good colors, right? We've got red, yellow, green, blue, whatever. And I was up very late decorating, and there was cupcakes to go with it, and so it was a whole cake, cupcake, a big set of stuff. And so I drop it off. She'd paid for delivery. I drove it all the way out to where she lived, and she messaged me that she didn't like it. She was very upset with the design. It didn't look like the picture. The colors weren't vibrant enough, etc. So, and when you're a new baker, you really take those beatings. It feels so awful, even though it's probably an easy fix on every side. It could have been easier for me to fix maybe in the moment had I thought of something to do, and now I could on the fly fix things if I needed. And so I just remember being kind of devastated that crap, what? And you want to be like, okay, is the customer just being picky? Are they being kind of finicky about color intensity? Because it was still red, and red obviously has many shades. And so if you compare different reds, maybe it wasn't the right kind of red. And I also remember being I feel like she's nitpicking. I feel like she's wrong. But there's two major concerns with this story that I want to share with you. One is sometimes as a baker or any kind of artistic outlet, like my friend who's the piñata maker, and I'll tie him back in here in a second, you have to make changes to the reality of what's happening. And so you're also not a perfect mimic. You're not a perfect photocopier, right? You cannot always do things exactly exact. So that's something to consider, right? And if a customer doesn't have that expectation set in their mind that you're not there to photocopy cakes, right? You're going to do your best interpretation. You're not there to rip off designs, etc. That helps them kind of understand their managing their expectations. So was the color off a shade? Sure. Okay, we're talking very, very minimally off. Barely off at all. And I'll look for those images to show you. And they had all the ground to stand on, though, because I had never set any expectations. I was new into baking and selling, and so I didn't have contracts. I didn't have expectations and guidelines and procedures and policies set in place for people to understand how things were going to go. And unfortunately, sometimes in those instances, you can be taken advantage of because people will just complain about anything, wanting their money back or whatever. I might have discounted her because I felt so bad, because again, early days of baking, going hand in hand with that, it's not like she was paying a lot because I wasn't charging enough back then. So that really made it even more devastating to give money back, which was my own fault because I wasn't charging enough to begin with, so I was maybe covering costs on that whole order. The other thing is sometimes we have to make changes because their ideas aren't realistic, right? And so my friend who does piñatas, and he was saying the other day, somebody sent him a picture and he was like, this is like, okay. And usually, yes, we do our very best as artists in whatever realm to make things as close as possible. But sometimes we kind of take creative license. We take some creative freedom. And for me, like, I love being creative on my own terms. I don't like when somebody says, make me a blue cake and do whatever you want. Like that, I don't like that kind of freedom. That's not where there's like some guidelines, but not a lot. I'm like, oh, that's not my thing. Anyway, he had changed the design of a superhero a little bit, and what he thought it looked like, and that it was better than the design they had originally given. And his wife was like, hey, did you ask the customer if it was okay to make this change? She's like, oh no, I forgot. So like, fingers crossed. And it all turned out fine. And I think we get really paranoid about that sometimes, that like we feel like we lose ourselves in like these restrictions of inspiration photos and forget that they are in fact just inspiration photos. So going along with this, what I implemented in my policies and procedures, it was in my order form, especially after this incident where the lady blew up on me about the colors and there wasn't enough polka dots. Like, okay. And they were like bigger. They were like, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch around, and they were all over. I'm not gonna, whatever. It's whatever. It's fine. Lesson learned. That I really needed something in my policies and procedures to set expectations so that reality was not earth shaking. And it's not that I just go off and do whatever I want, because I don't. I care about what they want it to look like, and I try to do my best for all the design aspects. And especially when people start to pay more, they definitely want to see a level of respect towards what they want, right? Like, you're not just doing whatever willy-nilly, like, I paid so much money for this and it's nothing like what I wanted. Like, they'd be very upset, and grounds to be upset. So in my form, what it says is that inspirational photos given to me are exactly that. They're for inspiration only. If there are any details that need to be exact, as in writing, colors, shapes, whatever, right? Just that it needs to be 100% specified by them to me prior to ordering. Okay? And that doesn't give me license to go off the cuff and just, do whatever, but it also kind of manages an expectation that these photos are inspiration only. They're not representative of my work. Okay? And I like to be maybe a little more cautious, and I don't like to go off. Like, I hate when people say do what you want. I'm not that person. I'm like, oh, just do whatever you want, blah, blah, blah. Someone did that recently, and I was like, oh, this is terrifying. What do you mean do what I want? It's not my cake, it's your cake. Like, oh, what if it looks bad to you? And I will like check it and be like, okay, but are you sure there's not something specific? Like, it has to have this, or it has to be rosettes, or it has to be fondant. Like, give me some direction here, because it can be anything. Literally, things can turn into anything. And so as you're taking orders, as you are making something for a customer, and you're starting to get those payments coming in, you're starting to establish yourself, you also need to be covering yourself in these kind of areas of artistic freedom or replicating inspirational photos, etc. You have to do it. If you're not doing that, and you don't have an order form with a policies and procedures section, if you don't have a contract set in, if you don't have these things, like, they can come after you and you have no ground to stand on, right? Whereas if you're managing expectations from the beginning, whether it's about color or design or height is another huge one. People are like, oh, it's so short. Like, well, you didn't want a cake for 60 people that was 12 inches tall. Your budget was for this size. Like, and we always try our best with proportions as well to make it as proportionate. But even height is a huge one when you see these beautiful, tall, double barrel cakes. Blah. And, that's not always the reality. Like, sometimes you had to be like, hey, listen, this picture serves 60 people and you only need a cake to serve 20. Do you want it to serve 20, or do you want it to look like the picture? Because it's two different things. It is entirely on you as the baker to manage expectations and let them know what things realistically are, like a height difference, a color difference. What else have I seen? Switching, where somebody wants a buttercream base instead of fondant. Say they hate fondant. Say that's fine. Just understand it's going to look like this, you know. And if you're good at your buttercream work, you can get it to look a lot like fondant and smooth and beautiful and all of that. But again, managing expectations of customers so that there isn't any kind of blow up. I have not had a blow up in forever. The last dissatisfied customer, and she wasn't even like dissatisfied. She had given me an arbitrary term, and it was my fault for not following up. She had said like, "Oh, I want a half sheet size sheet cake." And instead of me asking, "How many people do you need it to serve?" Because saying half sheet, that's not a standard size. A quarter sheet, not a standard size. They're not standard size terms, but people just get something in their head. So she came and picked it up and it was smaller than what she wanted. And she was very upset and tried to get all mathematical with me, which was kind of funny. And like, this is my understanding of what this size was. And I ended up on the fly making her like 2 dozen cupcakes to make up for the cake that was too small in her opinion. It was my fault, and I 100% know it was my fault. And I think I had the thought like, I should double check on what she needs the servings to be. Because again, when someone's like, "Oh, I want a 9-inch cake, blah, 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 blah," and I'm like, okay, but how many people does it need to serve? Because sometimes like, "Oh, it's for 5 people." Like, well, that's, 25 servings of cake. Are you sure you want it that big? Do you want it smaller? Or maybe they need it for more people and they're ordering a cake that's too small, which was the last time that happened to me, which was probably 4 years ago. It's been many years since that happened. And so we're going on lots of years, fingers crossed, knock on wood, right? That I don't have I don't have customers blow up at me anymore, right? No one's mad because the image is different. And I'm very articulate and very specific. If anything, it's probably annoying to them to be like, "Why doesn't she get the hint?" Because I don't want to screw up your cake and misunderstand or misrepresent what you wanted, okay? If you need help with this, because it can be tricky navigating these conversations, guiding the conversations, informing customers in a way that doesn't feel condescending or rude, then send me a message. I'm happy to help. I have a whole section of this in my business course, which I'm still pulling out and separating into individual modules. So right now my pricing guide is available just as the pricing guide. I also have my scheduling and freezing guide and storing guide. It's kind of an all-in-one. It's also in its own, so you could buy those two separately, and then the full business one as well. So I'm also working on pulling out my contract section, my photography and marketing section, my customer service section, because these all kind of intertwine a little to help you be successful in these areas, because this is probably one of the most stressful parts for me. It's not the baking, it's not the decorating, it's the people. So if you ever feel like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do," or, "Oh, I never thought of like, hey, I should tell them," sometimes you have to, in a very nice, kind, and loving way, tell them things. Inform them. Because even though they're the customer, and we want to think customer's always right, we need to let them kind of know what the realities of the situation are. So again, if you have questions, you can like comment below, you can message me. I am happy to answer them. And I also will have that guide available as well if you want to just jump into the course and kind of bite off that one small piece and just go over the customer service and ordering side. So I hope you have a good day. Learn from my mistakes and don't get yelled at and lose all of that sleep and money over something small like the color being wrong. So have a good one, and I'll talk to you later. Happy baking!